All right, folks, Curtis Stone here. We are carrying on our video series looking at all the states and provinces of Canada and the United States and places that you'd want to consider and places that you'd want to avoid and some just general food for thought. And today we're going to look at a state that a lot of people don't consider, but actually has a ton of good value in it if you can be in New York. I've got friends in Eastern or Western New York, and there's lots of good value there. Some of the cheapest properties that we see in the United States right now, outside of, say, Michigan, are in New York, particularly Eastern New York. Of course, anything near New York City, forget about it. Even up towards Albany can get pretty expensive. But you come into Western New York here towards Buffalo, past Finger Lakes, you can get some really good value. And New York State is actually quite a nice climate. It's sort of on the edge of a boreal climate meeting a temperate climate, and that's sort of illustrated if we just look at our Köppen Geiger map here for a second. We talk a lot about the Köppen Geiger. Which is a way of classifying all climates into 5 regions: tropical, arid, temperate, boreal, and polar. The boreal climates are typically hot and dry in the summer and very precipitous in the winter. The neat thing about the state of New York is that it's close to Pennsylvania, where when you come down into Pennsylvania, you really notice how much more wet everything is. But New York still gets a bit of that as well, as do Vermont and New Hampshire and a bit of Massachusetts, in that you do get more summer rain. Like, summer rain is actually a thing in this whole region here. Montreal, Ottawa, same thing. Maine, same thing. You actually get summer in the rain, but or rain in the summer. Whereas the boreal climates on the West Coast, that's not at all the case. Where I am down in southern BC here, you do not get the summer rains at all. You might get 1 or 2 in a whole summer, but that's it. But it's quite normal in these areas out here to get rain in the summer. And so that's an important thing to point out. And some parts of New York, you might see well over 20 inches of rain, but then still getting lots of snow in the winter. So there's a lot of water here, which is a great thing about New York. And you know what? On the western side of the state, you're quite far from New York City. You can be in New Jersey or Maryland and actually be closer to New York City than you are if you're in Western New York. So, food for thought there. I think as far as the no-go zones of New York, they're fairly obvious. Though I would probably, and we put this generic 50-mile circumference, it's a diameter, 50-mile diameter around all of the cities. But I would probably draw it, to customize it a bit more. I would probably just say, generally speaking, I would stay this far away from New York City, if you can, because if there was ever any sort of military event in the United States, New York City would be one of the top targets, right? DC, New York, Chicago, Detroit, along the coast, Miami, the big cities, and so I would definitely avoid that. And of course, the closer you are to New York City, the more the prices are insane. I mean, I've looked at properties just anywhere along the highway here, out of New York towards Albany, Saratoga Springs, very, very expensive. But when you start to come over here into this zone, you get a lot better value. One thing you want to consider too is if you're in any of these regions between, say, Buffalo, Rochester, you might be around here. The closer you are to Pennsylvania, the better, in the sense that the weather's a bit more stable. When you're really close to Lake Ontario or Lake Erie, you get the lake effect winters, which means that you can just get a hammering of snow. And I have some friends out there in that region this winter, after all the snow melted, just got like, boom, a foot of snow overnight when after everything was melted. And it's just like, oh my goodness, really? And so that's just characteristic of the lake effect. And so it's actually the same in a lot of these areas. I actually find though that as far as Lake Ontario is concerned, it's worse for those radical snow dumps on the south side of the lake than it is on the north side of the lake. I think if you know anybody in the southern Ontario region, they'll tell you that. The snow events just aren't as crazy reported as the events that are in New York and even Ohio and parts of Pennsylvania. It can be quite, just go look at U.S. weather history and you'll see. So you got to be prepared for that. And you know what? It's not necessarily a bad thing. I would way rather deal with lake effect snow than Tornado Alley or a hurricane zone or a tsunami zone any day. Because it's not going to destroy you overnight. You might have to spend a couple days digging yourself out of snow, but if you're prepared for it and you understand, the protocols that you should follow to live prepared for that, then it's not that big of a deal. So some good locations, right along Pennsylvania, could find some beautiful spots out here. Little town, Wellsville. Again, it's what I say all the time is there's a direct correlation between tyranny and concrete. And so the further you are, look how much green there is out here. New York State is beautiful. There's not a ton of ag. There's dirt roads and small towns out here. There's not a lot of bureaucrats out here. Not like there are the closer you get to New York City. And even between, where all these Catskill area, beautiful area, trendy. A lot of expats, call them New York City expats, come out to these areas. But up in the Hamptons and places like this, it's expensive. And so you're not going to start a homestead out in those kinds of places. But, you can come into some zones like this. Look at this. Beautiful. Lots of trees. Little small towns. Fairly benign agriculture. This is all going to be, feed for animals, straw, alfalfa, things like that. It's not a ton of big ag. They leave the big ag to the other states. In the U.S., it's all the stuff it's all here. All the big ag in the U.S. is all in this zone here. Nebraska, Iowa, parts of Missouri. That's where all the big ag is. Not a lot of it's happening in New York, which is nice. But, you could find really sweet properties up in places like this. Look at this. Look at some of these spots. Out along these dirt roads, beautiful, surrounded by trees, so much wildlife, so much nature. And again, if you're off the major roads and you're not in any big cities, people aren't going to bother you. You'll find out in these areas, there's old good old farm boys, good old homesteader people out in these areas. And it's not crazy. People get so hung up on just the politics of the day, but that changes every 4 years. So sometimes it makes more sense to plan where you want to live based on the local politics and what's implemented locally than it is even the state. Because if you're far enough in the state from it, it's just as likely to affect you as somebody who might live in a different state politically, but in the same bioregion, as it would if they're closer to a bigger city. So if you're not, because you can be in a conservative state, but be close to a leftist city. And so the state politics don't matter so much. It's just kind of what's around you. But you can find lots of really good spots. Look at this. Beautiful lakes, topography, trees, right? Look at these little beaches. This is beautiful country out here. Up through here, tons of privacy. Totally tucked away. People from New York City in a shit hits the fan scenario are not coming out this way. If the proverbial shit were to ever hit the fan in New York, people are most likely going to just go inland this way or south. They're going to go to warmer climates where they can survive easier. That's why I'm not really that big of a fan of Florida because everybody else wants to go there. And it's just so damn populated. We'll do a whole video on Florida as well. I digress. But, up in here towards Canada, beautiful parts of the state. I mean, if you drive through the country here, it's nice. Small towns. It's cool. There's lots of spots that you could farm, homestead out here, tons of privacy, People trust each other. There's not that urban madness that you get like when you get towards New York City. New York State is quite different from New York City because New York City is just this massive area just down on the bottom corner. The rest of the state is very separated from it. So, food for thought there. When you look at topography like this, just look at the light green versus the dark green. Go where the dark green is. Get on the backs of these areas. Get up in the high ground. That's what you want to look for. So yeah, that's some food for thought with New York State there, folks. And again, if you like this content, you like what I'm doing, you want to learn more about this kind of stuff and how you can do it yourself, I got a free webinar you can check out. And I'll show you 3 secrets to finding great properties that people undervalue. I'll show you how people make common mistakes when they're looking for properties, what to look for there. I'll show you my framework that we use to evaluating the properties. And then I'll show you some tricks in Google Earth. And you can use these same tools to do these assessments yourself. Because look, when the real estate market falls apart, which eventually it's going to, you're going to need to move fast because there's going to be other competing forces, big banks, BlackRock, places like that. They're going to be buying up properties so that you'll own nothing to be happy. And there's going to be a short window to make a move fast. This information can help you considerably when it comes time to make that move and look for properties. And so this stuff's going to help you do that. So check it out. It's free. And I'll see you guys in the next video.